Some tough moral questions to be faced now on BBC Two in this week's case from Court TV.
Do we believe in forgiveness? Do we believe in mercy? Do we believe in justice?
I think their crimes are bad enough that, yes, they should stay in prison for the rest of their lives.
I've been here 25 years. Well, of course I would love to be free. Anytime, all I have to do is look at fences and wires and know that there's a whole world beyond this. I was 21 when I came into prison.
It was an important day for Patricia Krenwinkel. After 25 years in prison, she was going before a parole board that had the power to grant her freedom. The parole board had to decide whether 25 years behind bars was sufficient punishment for Krenwinkel, or whether some crimes are so horrific that however much someone has reformed, they should stay locked up forever. The parole hearing took place at the Californian Institute for Women at Frontera, the prison where Patricia Krenwinkel was held. Patricia Krenwinkel was convicted of murder, but hers were no ordinary crimes. She was arrested in 1969 with Charles Manson and other members of the Manson family for a series of murders that took place in Los Angeles over 2 days. Krenwinkel and others had gone to the home of actress Sharon Tate and her husband Roman Polanski. Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, was found lying on the floor covered in blood. Abigail Folger, her boyfriend Wojciech Frykowski, Jay Sebring, and 18-year-old Stephen Parent were also killed. The murders continued the following night when members of the Manson family went to the home of businessman Leon LaBianca and his wife Rosemary. They were both stabbed and beaten to death. In total, 7 people had been murdered. The killings were sadistic and ritualistic. Manson said he'd wanted to start a race war, taking wallets from the white victims and leaving them in black areas of the city. The crimes terrified the people of Los Angeles and dominated the news for weeks. Patricia Krenwinkel, still a follower of Manson and having shaved her head at his request, was sentenced to death for her part in the 7 murders. But a year later, California abolished the death penalty, and her sentence was commuted to life.
By technicality, they got a lot more than the victims in this case will ever get, and that's a life. That's the only lucky break that they deserve, and it's more than they deserved.
I have been granted the right, after they removed the death penalty, to return to a parole board for them to consider within their hearts and their judgment whether or not I fit a criteria which they go down and read and decide, are you fit? So it's up to them.
You know, when I hear people speak about the death penalty and saying, well, isn't it cruel and unusual? I have to say, absolutely not. You want to see cruel and unusual? Or cruelty? Let me show you what they did to my sister and all the other victims. I'll show you cruel. What they did was cruel. We think so much more about them than they ever gave a thought about their victims.
Patricia Tate would have a chance to tell the parole board how she felt about Krenwinkel during the hearing. Nick Clark reports.
The state of California has some of the toughest policies on crime in the United States. The death penalty has been reinstated, and the policy known as 3 strikes and you're out has been introduced. That means life sentences without parole are now mandatory after 3 serious convictions. Members of the parole boards are political appointments chosen by the state governor. At the Krenwinkel hearing, the board consisted of 2 retired homicide detectives and a former Republican state assemblywoman. Patricia Krenwinkel was represented at her parole hearing by Wendy Park, a criminal defense lawyer who has attended numerous parole boards for a variety of clients. Park has represented Krenwinkel for the past 10 years. Stephen Kay was present to oppose parole for Krenwinkel. He was one of the prosecutors in the original trial in 1969 and has campaigned against parole for all the Manson followers ever since. Patricia Tate, who was 11 years old when her sister Sharon was murdered, was also at the hearing to oppose parole. She has become one of California's leading advocates of victims' rights. The members of the parole board had to review Krenwinkel's prison record and to decide whether she understood the magnitude of the crimes and felt any remorse. Above all, they had to judge whether she still posed a risk to society. They began the hearing by asking Krenwinkel in detail about her crime.
Raise your hand, so she may be sworn. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Okay. As I understand the statement of facts, on August 9, 1969, the prisoner in the company of crime partners Charles Watson, Linda Kasabian, and Susan Atkins drove to an address on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles. And thereafter, as a result of their actions, 5 individuals were murdered. At that time, the prisoner was armed with a knife, and crime partner Watson was armed with a .22 caliber revolver. Prior to entering the residence, Watson cut the telephone wires leading to the residence, and then the prisoner and crime partners climbed over a wall and entered the property. At that time, victim number 3, Steve Parent, apparently was leaving the property. He was confronted by Watson and was shot 4 times. Then the prisoner and crime partners went into the residence, and the victim in count 2, Frykowski, was asleep on the couch. The victim in count 4, Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, was in her bedroom, talking with the victim in count number 5, Jay Sebring. Victim in count 1, Abigail Folger, was in her bedroom. The victims were taken into the living room portion of the residence, where the victim, Sebring, attempted to escape and was shot by crime partner Watson. And after that, there was, I guess, a lot of confusion, people running around. Is that correct?
Yes.
And thereafter, the other victims were attacked and killed. And the one victim, Folger, ran out of the back door, and she was pursued by you. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
And you stabbed her several times?
Yes, I did.
Has she made it out to the yard itself?
Yes, she did.
And what was she doing?
She was running. She was fleeing.
Okay, was she clothed, or?
Yes.
And how did you catch up to her? What happened when you caught up to her?
I stabbed her.
In the back?
Yes. She turned around.
Did she fall immediately?
Yes.
Okay. How many times did you stab her?
I have no idea.
It says that in total, the victims at that location suffered approximately 102 stab wounds. Did you stab any of the other victims?
No, I did not.
How about Frykowski?
No.
Did you do anything to Frykowski?
No, I did not.
Did you assist in tying him up, or?
No, I did not.
Okay. How about Tate?
No, I did not.
Did you contact Tate?
No, I did not.
We may come back to this area, and one of the other commissioners might have some questions about the life crimes. Right now I'm going to go into the other factors, social factors, and...
The parole board then turned their attention to Krenwinkel's background. They wanted to know whether she had a criminal record before the killings, and to ask her about her history of drug use. First, they reviewed her family background.
No, that's fine.
You were born in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
right? And your parents separated when you were about 14 or 15. And your sister, you had one sister named Charlene Mann, who was older than you, and ultimately she became addicted to drugs, and she died when she was about 29 years old. Is that correct?
Yes.
You lived primarily with your mother?
Yes.
Okay. And you did graduate from high school?
Yes, I
From
did.
University High?
Yes.
Okay. And then, in general, you were on the road after a period of time, and ultimately you held several different jobs, and at some point in time you quit the jobs and you ended up joining up with the Manson family. And I know that's kind of a synopsis of your life prior to your incarceration, but And the other commissioners may want to ask some questions about that later on. In terms of your prior record, I know that you were arrested for possession of dangerous drugs in Ukiah. That was dismissed.
Yes, it was.
Did you know that you started taking drugs when you were about 14 or 15? I assume those were prescription drugs at that time due to your having been overweight. The doctor prescribed some Benzedrine?
Yes, that's right.
And ultimately, you started using illegal drugs.
Yes.
And you used marijuana, reds, whites, acid,
Alcohol.
and other marijuana derivatives, peyote and things like that. There was some indication that as a result of having used the LSD that you had taken, quote, quite a few trips.
Approximately 250 to 500 probably.
You came to CIW in April of 1971, and you've remained in this institution since then. Your classification is 0, and you've never had any disciplinary crimes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But that's pretty remarkable that you haven't had any disciplinary. That's unusual.
During her time in prison, Patricia Krenwinkel has been involved in a number of the voluntary programs at Frontera. The inmates run their own firefighting unit at the prison, and the board asked her about her work on physical training for the members of that unit.
I notice your work now. You're a trainer.
Yes.
And you received exceptional work reports. What type of training are you doing?
I'm a physical fitness trainer for the women who are trained here to go to fire camp. We have 3 fire camps that are, 2 of them are located in San Diego, 1 in Malibu. These women have to meet the fire requirement physical fitness tests in order to be able to go out and live at these camps and fight the fires as we just had, all those massive fires. All our gals are out there doing that. And so it's a good job. We have to teach them teamwork because we work as a team, myself and the other trainers. The focus is teamwork and physical fitness, and because it's one of the few programs here that of course requires not only physical fitness, but you need to be able to work and get along well together, and you need to have a really good philosophy about the people you're working with, because your life relies on those other people in a fire situation.
You've been involved in the walkathons for child abuse prevention, and you have been active in the READ program, which is a tutoring program.
Yes.
Is that in the evenings?
Yes, it is.
And is that a little different than the Yes I Can program?
Oh, Yes I Can is, that's a program that you help tutor people to get their GED. READ helps people to learn how to read. Most of the skills are back from about 5th grade.
Okay, so
most of our readers are
they're not
5th grade education.
I see. So they're not even close to getting their GED.
No,
They need your
tutoring. Right, we're just trying to develop word skills and reading skills on a very basic level.
And have you personally gotten a lot out of doing that?
Oh, I've loved doing that.
Think of the impact that she must have on some of these young people, where she can, talk about what happened to her as a young person, as becoming so extremely involved in drugs, and where all of this led to. And look at her sitting in this prison setting and, being able to communicate with these young people on a one-on-one basis. So she's doing that too, and I think I think it's great. I mean, it's giving something back.
Every time she volunteers, she gets a chrono written up and put in her file, which can be used to her benefit when she has a parole hearing. So it's not like she's doing this all for free just out of the goodness of her heart. She's no dummy. I mean, she's doing this because she's getting brownie points.
I do it for myself because it feels so good to be able to try to give something back to the community and to the people at large, because I feel like it's necessary for me to feel like that I'm able to do something, that my life, I have to give it some kind of purpose.
Whether there has been specific
Next, the parole board had to decide whether Patricia Krenwinkel still posed any risk to society. To do that, they turned to her most recent psychiatric evaluations.
The major progress is in your ability to gain insight into yourself and in being affirmative and aware of yourself. You have learned to communicate this new understanding and present yourself in a positive, clear manner, even when you have to talk about the worst aspects of yourself, such as your involvement in the crime. From this new understanding, your expressed remorse and compassion becomes believable. There was no sign of mental disorder presented in the interview, even when you have to talk about the worst aspects of yourself, such as your involvement in the crime. And under the general conclusions, they say that there's no significant relationship between the crime and the present diagnosis. During observation in the institution, especially during the last 3 years, you have significantly improved and are still improving. And under parole release, it says violence potential outside a controlled setting at the time of your crime is considered to have been extreme due to your total dependency and drug addiction. At present, your violence potential is estimated to be well below average. He goes on to say that you are a violent criminal only by history and you do not pose a threat at the present level of functioning in this setting, and it is predicted that you would not present a threat in the uncontrolled setting if released into the community at this time. This inmate has made over the last 3 years is substantial and positively affecting your personality. Do you agree with that? Do you feel that you've come a long way in the last 3 years?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The parole board then questioned Patricia Krenwinkel again about her crimes. They were looking for inconsistencies in her story and for any signs of remorse.
I did have a couple questions. In regards to the first residence that you went to, the Polanski residence, prior to leaving the ranch, you armed yourself with a knife, didn't you?
Yes, I was given one.
Okay. And when you went there, and Mr. Watson was cutting telephone wires, you were pretty well aware of what you were going to go into the residence for, weren't you?
At the most, I wasn't sure what we were going to do until he said what we were going to do. I had no idea. Because at that point in time, like I said, we had been going and doing robberies, basically. We had been stealing things. I had no idea that that's what the intention was at all.
Okay, when you
never been expressed.
Okay. When you say you had been doing robberies, what do you mean by robberies? Were you stealing from people, or you were stealing out of houses, or?
Well, actually, there had been a couple robberies that were done in houses, yes.
Where the victims were present?
No.
So you went into homes where no one was present, you took some property?
Right.
Okay. Did you think you're going to kill anyone?
Absolutely not.
Were you the type of person that wanted to kill someone at that point in time?
Absolutely not.
Why didn't you leave?
I would have never thought of leaving. I didn't know what to do. I was waiting for instructions.
Okay, so the first victim shot outside of the actual residence itself, but on the property of the residence, right? And you've seen this person mortally wounded, now you go into the residence. And apparently you displayed your knife at that point in time and actually rounded up 3 of the victims.
Yes.
Okay, and that would have been Miss Tate, Folger, and one other person. Did you take 3 people out of the bedrooms?
One of the, yeah, I think.
Kind of round them up?
Yes.
Sebring?
Yes,
Jay Sebring.
yes.
Okay. You rounded them up and brought them all into one room?
Sometimes I am not sure who said what and what really happened, because there are so many accounts from everyone. So to do it, so to do complete justice, I don't have absolute recall of 25 years ago.
I guess the issue here is when I first listened to what you had to say, I got the impression that you were very naive, didn't know what was going to happen there, went in, were caught up in this thing. One woman runs outside, you chase her and stab her, and then you kind of go off into the distance at the back house, and then all these other terrible things happen to everyone in the house. But actually, your role was a little bit different than that. You actually did help round up the people inside of the house. And as a matter of fact, when you rounded them up, I believe that's about the time that Miss Folger began fighting with you. She actually fought with you in the house, didn't she?
Yes, when they were trying to tie the people up, yes.
Okay. And how about Sebring? He started to...
Yeah, he fought with Tex.
And then he ended up being shot at that time.
Yes.
And Folger ran outside, and that's when you pursued her
Yes.
After the initial fight and ended up stabbing her. And so you had already seen at this point in time 2 persons murdered, or at least mortally wounded, and you yourself had participated in an additional one where someone was laying possibly mortally wounded. She had been stabbed numerous times. And then you went to the back house. Now, what did you think at that point? 3 people were dying or dead.
Yes, and that's, I felt, it's hard to describe because I had no idea even how to connect a thought together at that point. I had no idea what we were going to do when we went to that residence. When all the madness took place, I had absolutely there was no way to put together the kind of rational thinking because there was no rational thought in my head. I had followed the instructions as I had been told to do, as I'd been doing for a very long time. And at that point, everything was out of my control. I felt helpless. I felt hopeless to do anything. All I was doing is carrying through a macabre dance. It was horrible, and I didn't know how to stop it. And I never knew how to stop it, just like I never knew how to stop Manson all along.
At that point in time, when this was occurring, you weren't under the influence of drugs, were you?
Yeah.
Now,
but my reality had been altered from years of drug use.
Now, in reference to the LaBianca deaths, my understanding, the way you explained it, as I understood it before, was that when you went into the house, she was in the bedroom, you went in and she had a pillowcase on her head, and you attempted to stab her, couldn't, and then you went and got Tex, and you don't know what happened. But as I understand some of the documents related to this matter, in fact, when you went in with Miss Van Houten, she placed the pillowcase over Miss LaBianca's head, and then when you stabbed, you didn't bring a knife to that residence. You used the knife from the house, is that correct? You went into the kitchen and got a knife?
Yes.
And you went into where Mrs. LaBianca was, and you stabbed her. And in fact, you tried to stab her in the neck, and I guess you stabbed her in the collarbone so hard that the knife either broke or glanced off. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's when you went and got Tex Watson, because he had a bayonet.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when he came back into the room, and you were there when he started stabbing her. Is that correct?
I was leaving him because he was telling me instructions and I was leaving him.
But you watched them stab her.
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. The only reason that you went and got your crime partner was because you were ineffective in murdering this woman, so
That's
you
right.
got someone that could do the job properly. Okay. Any questions, Ms. Bennett?
I just have a couple. And what was your relationship with Manson?
Originally, when I met Mr. Manson, basically I fell in love with a man. I met him, and it was he and I thought I was falling in love with a man. Eventually, he started defining himself as a god. And once becoming a god, then there is not a male-female relationship as would be considered.
So initially you had an intimate relationship.
Yes.
with him, but then it changed.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, those are all the questions I have.
Mr. Guadarrama?
Yeah. In reading all the documentation, it indicated that you really lack remorse.
I felt empty.
How do you feel now about what you've done?
It's grotesque. It's absolutely horrible. It's very difficult for me to live with the fact that I could do anything so horrible and so horrendous. Because that is not who I am. That is not what I believe in. I have always felt that things should be treated with gentleness, tenderness, and love. Because that's the most lacking thing that I have found in my life and in most people's lives. I've never tried to create something that was ugly. And that's what came out of me. So I try every day, the best I can, to deal with it. Every day of my life, I try to define to myself that I have a little bit of self-worth. because it is terribly difficult to deal with this on a minute-by-minute basis, because I feel terrible about it, but I cannot change it. No matter what I do, I cannot change 1 minute of my life. And as I've said before, I don't expect the board to say that I can go home. I am paying for this as best as I can. There is nothing more I can do outside of being dead to pay for this, and I know that's what you wish. But I cannot take my own life.
Please.
I'm sorry.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Ms. Krenwinkel, why don't you take a second to compose yourself?
Krenwinkel, I think a lot of her tears are crocodile tears. I've known her too long. I don't believe her remorse. I think that she's sorry because she got caught.
I've known Pat 10 years. I've talked to her. She's never broken down like that. It was so emotional that you don't get those emotions unless they're deep within you. And that has to be the truest show of what she was really feeling that I've ever seen. And how dare he say, oh, this is just a big show.
For Stephen Kay, remorse was crucial to any parole.
I think that in our culture, in our society, it's hard for us to understand how human beings can go out and murder other human beings. We look for reasons to try and understand why people can do this sort of thing. And if at least if they say they're sorry, we say, oh, gosh, they must have been temporarily insane or something like that. They were not themselves, because look, they're sorry now. They're crying. And isn't that good? And it makes us feel better about ourselves, that we can understand how this terrible thing could have taken place.
Remorse, there is, again, it's like there is no more than saying, I absolutely apologize. I don't know what they want. Do they want a wellspring of continuous tears for 25 years? I live with this every day. When I wake up every day, I am in a cell. I have been removed from the people that I love. Every day I wake up, I know why I'm here. I know that I have done something that has offended the community and the state and people. So I wake up already knowing that somehow I am an offense. That's why I am here.
Patricia Tate insisted Krenwinkel hadn't changed.
Absolutely not. It doesn't matter. She is maybe one of the worst. She willingly participated both nights. She wanted to do what she did. And she went out and did it. And I don't care if she's rehabilitated. I don't care anything about her except for that she should stay in prison for the rest of her living life.
At the hearing, it was Stephen Kay's turn to make his statement to the board. He believed Patricia Krenwinkel should never be released. Having heard her described as a model prisoner, he urged the board to remember the viciousness of the crimes she'd committed.
Okay, Mr. Kay.
Thank you. Members of the board, when you are considering whether or not to find Patricia Krenwinkel suitable for parole, I urge you to strongly consider what Charles Manson had to say about her. Now, Charles Manson, I think we can all agree, is a despicable human being. However, Charles Manson did live with her on a day-to-day basis over a lengthy period of time.
Excuse me, I really hate to do this to Mr. K because I realize I'm interrupting his final speech here. But it's my understanding that the prosecutor can only limit his comments to the facts that are before this board, the facts that are in the C file. And I think outside comments from anybody, whether it was Mr. Manson or news reports or anything else, are improper for this board.
Mr. Manson said that Miss Krenwinkel was his complete reflection, that she was more like him than any other member of the family. Now, this is kind of a scary thought, isn't it, since we know about other members of the family. Has Patricia Krenwinkel earned your vote for parole suitability due to the fact that she's stayed out of trouble in prison and has now, during the last 2 years, attended AA and NA classes and psychotherapy on a regular basis? I think the answer is definitely no. What she has earned is the right to still be considered as one of the most cold-blooded female murderers in American history. Has she made progress in prison, in the controlled prison setting? I think the answer to that is that she has, especially during the past 2 years when she is finally facing up to her long history of drug dependency. But make no mistake about it, the main reason that Patricia Krenwinkel should be found unsuitable for parole is due to her active participation in 7 of the most vicious, brutal murders in the history of American crime. These were random murders of strangers. These are people, most of these people were innocent people literally butchered in the supposed sanctity of their own homes. And Miss Krenwinkel, of course, was a participant on both nights of murder. Let's look a little bit at her participation. And some of what I'm going to tell you varies a little bit from what she told you today. I'm glad that, Mr. Chairman, you brought out at the end that she was armed with a knife when she left the Spawn Ranch. She was armed with a knife. They were all armed. They knew what was going to happen. This wasn't going to be a burglary or a robbery. Tex Watson had even had training classes for murder at the ranch on how to stab people, that when you stab them, you don't just stab the knife in and pull it out. You pull up on the knife because you can cause more damage. When she got in the house, she walked in towards the bedroom area. Abigail Folger was in bed reading a novel, and then Miss Krenwinkel and Miss Adkins went to the back bedroom. Sharon Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant, was in bed. At the foot of her bed, talking to her, was her longtime friend Jay Sebring. At knife point, Miss Krenwinkel and Susan Adkins got Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring and Abigail Folger out of their bedrooms into the living room. Miss Krenwinkel fought with Miss Folger to try and keep her there. Miss Folger broke free, ran out of the back of the house. She followed Abigail Folger out to the front yard, all the way past the pool in the back and around to the front quite a distance, and pounced on her in the front yard and stabbed her over and over repeatedly. She had no remorse for this. All she could talk about in the car on the way back was how her hand hurt from stabbing the victims. And she did use the word victim. She didn't say from stabbing the victim, but she said her hand hurt from hitting the victim's bones when she was stabbing them. I strongly urge the board to find Patricia Krenwinkel unsuitable for parole and give her the maximum 5-year denial that is provided for in Penal Code Section 3041.52c. The fact that she has programmed well during the last 2 years does not overcome what she has done in these terrible, atrocious murders. I think that if you look at the total picture, Patricia Krenwinkel still presents an unreasonable risk of harm to society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kay.
The parole board is not supposed to take the notoriety of the crime into account, but in the Krenwinkel case, it was difficult to ignore public opinion. The Manson murders were amongst America's most infamous crimes, and the public outrage at the time left a lasting impression. Granting Patricia Krenwinkel parole could be construed as being soft on crime and could have serious political consequences.
The publicity rekindles the memory in everybody's mind about what Krenwinkel did and what the other defendants did. That's the biggest weapon that I have in these parole hearings, because outside of Manson, they're all model prisoners because they're smart. And they know that they can never have a chance of getting out of prison unless they are model prisoners.
And their criteria is very much based on, are you a danger? Would you commit the same crime? Well, if that's part of the criteria, of course not. I would never do any of that again. Number one, the circumstances would never come, but my God, I've grown. I've spent these years looking at every detail of the kind of person I was that allowed me to get into a situation like that. It could never be repeated.
For Patricia Tate, that was not the point.
It doesn't matter. It's not an issue. She committed a very heinous crime, and she not just went out the first night, she went out the second night. She knew, because she committed murder the first night, and she willingly went out to kill the second night.
After a short recess, the parole hearing continued. It was Wendy Park's chance to persuade the board that Patricia Krenwinkel had changed and that she was no longer a threat to society. She had to impress on them that they should be looking at Krenwinkel's recent record and not going back over the crime itself.
If the crime itself is something that will keep her in here for the rest of our lives, then please let us know now. We will end this meeting and we will go outside and take the court's determination on this. The crime itself cannot be changed. It was a horrendous crime. It has been talked about in detail here today. That can never be changed. Miss Krenwinkel cannot change it. I can't change it. Mr. Chick K can't change it. Miss Tate can't change it. Nobody can. So what is the purpose then at this point? Is to say, is there something that this woman can provide to society in a safe manner? Is there any good that has come from the fact that her life was not taken? And that's the point we're starting from. I would love to sit here and just read through everything that I have read in this file over the years that I've been doing this, over the period of time that I have read the most recent updated file. This woman has finally pulled out of a horrendous experience and is now able to give something back in her own way. Use of drugs, as we all know, can have a horrible effect on people. It can be mind controlling, and that is what has happened here. That is what happened that many years ago. We've talked about the Manson family, and in the past I've also talked about cults. Most recently we've had David Koresh, another cult leader that was able, through the use of drugs or power or the drug of religion, to control people, to control their lives, to get them to kill for him. And isn't that what happened 25 years ago with Charles Manson? In his ability to take people that were hurting for whatever reason. They were hurting because they wanted something they couldn't find. They were hurting because they were using drugs. They were feeling insecure. He knew how to take somebody and say, come with me, I'll make you feel good, I'll make you happy. And along the way, let me keep your mind under control because we're going to feed you as much drugs as we possibly can. And I will eventually, through my powers, through my personality, be able to convince you that I am the all-powerful and you will do what I say. That is something that happened 25 years ago. But that is now past. Has this woman progressed to a point where a date should be considered? I think it's time to do that. I think it's time to say, we will give you a date. The standards for determination of suitability go in a number of areas. One is social history. The social history is not significant to negate a parole date. The past and present mental state. We understand now what the mental state was at the time. It was practically non-existent. It was controlled by another person. The mental state that we have today, as shown in the most recent psychological report, is the fact that Ms. Krenwinkel is a person that should be suitable for parole. She is not a danger to society.
I grew up so very frightened of these people. It's therapeutic to speak out to them because you're not just speaking to a person, you're speaking to the perpetrator, the people that did it. And so it's kind of like it gets it off your back a little bit to know that they have to hear you. They have to hear what you have to say.
At this time,
Patricia Tate was at Krenwinkel's hearing to speak against parole. After her sister Sharon Tate was murdered, their mother started a campaign to increase the rights of victims' families. She asked Patricia to carry on the work, and the campaign has achieved some important changes in the law. Now, victims' families in California not only have the right to appear at parole hearings, they can also have the last word to the board.
I don't trust her. I don't trust any of these people. I don't want them out. I think, as her attorney said, I think their crimes are bad enough that, yes, they should stay in prison for the rest of their lives. Like my sister will stay in her grave for the rest of time, and her baby, and Abigail Folger. I'm sorry. I remember, I feel like she's lost, like she has no memory of what happened that night and what she did. And she didn't know him. I knew him. I knew Gibby. Does she remember what they looked like? Does she remember when she led my sister down the hallway? What she looked like? She doesn't hardly remember what she did. Did she ever bother to even look at these people? Or she was so bloodthirsty that she just went out and did and was willing to participate, obviously, in everything that she did do? I've seen the pictures of the aftermath of what she did and the rest of these prisoners did to my sister, to Gibby, to Jay, to Wojtek, to the kid out in the car. And there's no face with this story. Well, I remember my sister's face, and I remember her belly that stuck out to here. And nothing can be done about it, absolutely nothing, except for my sister and Gibby and all of them paid with their lives. And I think that she should pay with her life in prison. And there should be no question about it. I get countless letters from people. People are afraid of them. They will always be afraid of them because they were easily led. They were led by Charles Manson. I don't want to take chances that she's going to get out there. I don't care if she's 68 or 102. I don't want to take a chance on any of these people getting out at any age and being able to be led again like they were once by some wild, crazy maniac. And I think most people out there aren't willing to take that chance either. We don't want to see these people out. Their crimes were so heinous that they should all be in prison for the rest of their life. I don't want them out to make more victims, for them to fall prey on what they fell to with Charlie Manson and this whole cult thing. And her crime was, yes, absolutely bad enough to stay in prison for the rest of her life, and I hope that's exactly what happens. It's caused my family much, much, much pain. It will go on through, when my mom's passed away now, it will go through me. What she did will affect down generations and generations and generations, the big ripple effect. I don't understand these people. I don't understand why we even put them up for parole. I don't know why we sit here. But that's her right, and it's as my right to come in here and speak my mind, and I am thankful for that.
I don't think it's fair that she's sitting there in the parole hearing. It can only serve one purpose, and that's to influence the board in an area they should not be influenced in. She basically has the last word. And what is proven by that? Everybody else has to follow certain rules on what they can say or discuss in a board hearing. But apparently, whether there are rules towards this victim or not doesn't mean anything, because the board certainly lets them ramble on. And it's just to get the sympathy of the board. But that's not what they're there for.
Thank you for your consideration.
The parole board had heard all the evidence. They now had to make their decision on Patricia Krenwinkel, whether to grant her parole or to deny it for a period of up to 5 years.
Maybe one day we'll actually get somebody that isn't afraid of the governor, that isn't afraid of other political appointees and will say, I've reviewed all of this and I think it's time to let go.
In California, by the definition of the penal code, the reason that a defendant is incarcerated is for punishment. There's nothing about rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is great, and if that happens, that's wonderful. That's a byproduct of a good prison system. But that's not the reason we send people to prison in California. It's punishment.
A long time ago, although they've removed rehabilitation, rehabilitation itself means rehabit. It means they take you out of society, and then eventually you gain the skills to rehabit and go back into the community from which you've offended or you have committed a crime and you've done something wrong.
The prison system is set up for many purposes. Retribution is one of them, but the biggest issue is safety, isn't it? The biggest issue is to not make more victims.
If we decide people are just no good and are no good ever, then do we just eliminate them? Or do we believe that people do change, and if we do, then do we give them second chances? Do we believe in forgiveness? Do we believe in mercy? Do we believe in justice?
The parole board called Patricia Krenwinkel back into the hearing.
We're back on record. The time is 20 minutes after 10.
They had taken just 15 minutes to make their decision. It was time to tell Patricia Krenwinkel the outcome.
Ms. Krenwinkel, the panel has reviewed all the information received from the public and relied on the following circumstances in concluding that you're not suitable for parole.
The board had decided to refuse parole to Patricia Krenwinkel.
Society and a threat to public safety if released from prison. The offenses were carried out in an especially cruel and callous.
But it was not denied for the maximum period, and she will be allowed to reapply in 3 years' time. By then, it will be 28 years since Patricia Krenwinkel was convicted. She will have spent more than half of her life in prison.